2024 is coming to an end, but as we look back at this past year for WWE, who were the defining stars of the year? That's what we're here to find out. I'm Brandon, and this is Wrestling Talk. So with the year coming to an end, I thought it would be fun to break down the top 10 superstars of 2024 for both the men and women. And in doing that, I didn't want this to be a purely objective list where I'm just looking at accolades, match wins, who main evented the most PLEs, all that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, wins and losses don't really matter. It's more so a simple question of when you look back at the past year, who was the definitive superstar? So in putting this list together, it's going to be a mix of both the objective stats as well as my personal favorites. But before we get into the top 10, I do have a few honorable mentions. 2024 was a great year for NXT call-ups, namely Braun Breaker and Carmelo Hayes. Carmelo Hayes had a bunch of the year's best matches with Andrade, and Braun Breaker won the Intercontinental title twice. I don't think either guy had a year notable enough to make it onto the top 10, which speaks to how stacked this year is. But if anything, I think 2024 laid the groundwork for both of these guys to make the top 10 list in 2025. Another person who made a huge splash once they debuted on the main roster is Jacob Fatu. From an athletic standpoint, he is one of, if not the best on the roster, and he has instantly been put into an awesome position with this new bloodline story. It's tough for me to say he was one of the 10 defining stars of the year though, because he didn't really have a lot of singles matches, and similar to Braun Breaker and Carmelo Hayes, I think 2025 is really going to be the year of Jacob Fatu, whereas 2024 just laid the groundwork. For other honorable mentions, you have to throw in Kevin Owens. He did solid work in the US title scene with Logan Paul during the first part of the year, then found his way into feuding with the Bloodline yet again alongside Randy Orton in the second part of the year. But let's be honest, his year really kicked into high gear at Bash in Berlin, because from there on we kickstarted this slow heel turn, which is setting up Kevin Owens to be the next Drew McIntyre, where he's a heel, but his logic and everything he says makes perfect sense. 2025 is going to be an insane year for Kevin Owens now that he's a heel and probably will remain a heel for the whole year. And in talking about Kevin Owens, you have to mention Sami Zayn. He's the one that ended the longest Intercontinental title reign of all time. He then went on to have a great program with Chad Gable, put over Braun Breaker, and rounded out the year by reuniting with the OG Bloodline. While he may not have been in the main title scene, Sami Zayn had a banner year. LA Knight had a great year where he finally won the US title. I don't think he makes the top 10 though. I think 2023 was more of a defining year for LA Knight. Not only was he the breakout star of that year, but that's where he had most of his more iconic moments. His program with Roman Reigns, his promos against The Miz, teaming with John Cena. I feel like 2023 was a bit more memorable than 2024 for LA Knight. Another honorable mention has to be Chad Gable, mainly because of his program with Sami Zayn. And let's be honest, Chad Gable is the biggest missed opportunity of 2024. We all wanted him to be the one to end Gunther's IC title reign, but it didn't happen. Then we all wanted him to be the one to take the title off of Sami Zayn, and it didn't happen, despite a massively popular heel turn. We all wanted Otis to finally turn on Chad Gable and have this awesome program between the two. That didn't really happen. And what we ended up getting was Chad Gable forming a new, less charismatic faction, and then just being fed to the Wyatt Six. If you ask me, Chad Gable is the biggest missed opportunity of 2024. There just could have been so much more. But honorable mentions are out of the way. Let's get into the top 10 men's WWE superstars of 2024. Coming in at number 10 is Seth freaking Rollins, the MVP of WrestleMania 40. When you look at the totality of the year Seth had, it's hard to put him any higher than number 10 because he really didn't do much post WrestleMania. He had a title match with Damian Priest at Money in the Bank, he was the ref for Punk vs. Drew at SummerSlam, and then he came back to have a feud with Bronson Reed. So overall, this wasn't one of Seth Rollins' more active years, but let's be honest, the reason he's on this list is WrestleMania 40. He walked into WrestleMania with a bad knee injury, wrestled the main event of night 1, and then not even 24 hours later, wrestled the opening match of night 2, and then still took part in the main event of night 2. From a physical standpoint, it's beyond impressive, but from a story standpoint, he was the MVP. Going into WrestleMania, the whole story was Cody can't trust Seth to be his shield against Roman, and yet when it was all said and done, Seth was just that, Cody's shield. Can't undersell it enough how important Seth was to WrestleMania 40's success. So because of that, he easily makes this list. Number 9, Dominik Mysterio. Mysterio, the heel that turned heel. Honestly, I have never seen that. I think his year really kicked off once Liv Morgan came into the picture, and then from there on out, Dominik Mysterio just became the punching bag for the Rhea Liv feud. Some may think it's annoying, but that's by design. This was the year that Dom Mysterio cemented himself as one of, if not the biggest heel in WWE. He was already a star given what he did last year, but this year he really took it to the next level. The mustache, growing out the hair, they made toilet paper with his face on it. They're not just gonna do that for any random heel. They did it because they think it's gonna sell. Similar to Seth Rollins, Dom did not have an incredibly active year as an in-ring wrestler, but proved himself to be one of the MVPs. He's almost inarguably the face of Judgment Day, which is crazy to think because when he originally joined Judgment Day a couple years ago, it was okay, but now he's basically the leader of this faction, even standing up to Finn Balor. I can't wait to see where he goes next year, but this year, he was one of the top stars. Number 8, Jey Uso. He broke away from the bloodline last year, but 2024 is really what cemented him as main event Jey Uso. From the entrance, to the merch, to the yeet, he's one of the crowd's absolute favorite superstars. And when he finally won the Intercontinental title, it was a huge moment. Top it off, he reunited with the bloodline as a fully bona fide main event star. Out of all of the OG bloodline members, Jey Uso has went through the biggest change. And while he's teaming with the OG bloodline now, I don't think that'll be permanent, which is why I suspect 2025 will be even bigger for Jey Uso. I know a lot of people might not like him being on this list because when you look at WrestleMania 40, he arguably had the worst match of the card. But when you look back at 2024, it's hard to say that Jey Uso was not a defining star of this year. Coming in at number 7, Damian Priest. In a lot of ways, this was a breakout year for Damian Priest. He entered this year as a tag team champion and ended it as a full-on perennial main eventer. When he originally won the Money in the Bank briefcase and kept having failed cash-ins, one couldn't help but think that WWE didn't see him as championship material. But then fast forward to WrestleMania 40, he had one of the best moments of the entire weekend when he cashed in on Drew McIntyre, and then from there on out, he continued to prove himself as a top guy with each title defense. Jey Uso at Backlash, Drew McIntyre a Clash at the Castle where he fought through a bit of an injury, Seth Rollins at Money in the Bank, and then Gunther at SummerSlam, which is one of the best matches of the entire year. To me, that match is what cemented Damian Priest as a star. I'm curious how his 2025 is going to look because I don't think he's going to find his way into the World Heavyweight title scene, at least for WrestleMania. But at the end of the day, I think him breaking away from the Judgment Day was a genius call. Coming in at number 6, The Rock. This will be the most controversial pick for sure because The Rock only wrestled one match. So from an in-ring standpoint, he does not belong on this list at all. But from a character standpoint, it's hard to deny it because his heel turn going from the People's Champ to the final boss is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, pivot in WWE history. And when you look back on the entire road to WrestleMania, part of the reason why it's so great is because of The Rock. All the promos he cut, the feud he had with Cody Rhodes, the match at WrestleMania 40 was awesome. He played a big part in the main event of night 2. Because he only wrestled one match, I have to leave him out of the top 5. I just do. But the impact that The Rock had on WWE this year cannot be understated because the final boss gimmick is arguably the best iteration of the Rock character, save for maybe Hollywood Rock, but even that lacks a bit of the depth that this final boss character has, where he's basically the Thanos of WWE. Kicking off the top 5, CM Punk, who similar to the Rock only wrestled a few times this year, but despite being injured at the Royal Rumble, he was still a major part of the entire WrestleMania season and beyond. His feud with Drew McIntyre is inarguably the best feud of the year, and even while he was out, he was still cutting some of the best promos of the entire year, whether it was against Drew, Seth, or Cody. He was a part of some iconic moments like costing Drew McIntyre the title at WrestleMania, costing Drew McIntyre the title at Clash at the Castle, costing Drew McIntyre the title at Money in the Bank, and then from there the feud really kicked off. They were able to make a cheap bracelet feel like a World Heavyweight title, and it goes without saying, but their match at Bad Blood is one of the best matches of the year, if not the best. Coming in at number 4, Roman Reigns. Started the year as one of WWE's biggest heels, ended the year as one of WWE's biggest babyfaces. Enough said. Roman Reigns was never not going to be on this list. This is the year where he ended his all-time great title reign, and then after all these years was finally accepted as a beloved babyface. It's hard for me to put him up much higher than number 4 though, because other than WrestleMania 40, he was gone for a majority of the year, and then when he came back, it was a lot of multi-person matches. Bad Blood, Crown Jewel, War Games. But even though he only had a few matches, he is still one of the top stars this year. Coming in at number 3, Gunther. From an in-ring standpoint, Gunther is probably number 1 this year. He had the best matches of the year, namely at WrestleMania 40 and SummerSlam, became the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion in history, won the King of the Ring tournament, won the World Heavyweight title at SummerSlam, main evented shows like Bash in Berlin and Crown Jewel, pissed off Bill Goldberg, the list goes on. And going into 2025, he's definitely going to be in the world title scene for a majority of the year. Because from here on out, he is a main event top guy, probably for the rest of his career. But coming in at number 2 is Cody Rhodes. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This was the year of Cody Rhodes. He finished the story and became the new face of WWE and the entire wrestling industry as a whole. When you look at all the accolades this year, he won the Royal Rumble for the 2nd year in a row, main evented both nights of WrestleMania and was the one to end Roman Reigns' title reign. And then after that, he became WWE's top guy. He had one of the best matches of the year with AJ Styles at Backlash, had a great match with Logan Paul, got involved with the Bloodline again, tag teamed with Roman Reigns, and as the year wrapped up, was a part of a major personal story with Kevin Owens. You can easily make an argument that Cody Rhodes is the number 1 superstar this year, and honestly, I'm even convincing myself of it right now as I'm talking. But as incredible of a year as this was for Cody Rhodes, there's one superstar who I think was more so the unsung hero or MVP of 2024, and that is number 1, Drew McIntyre. When you look at this year for Drew McIntyre, he without a doubt did the best work of his career, namely with the CM Punk feud and how he just milked it for all it was worth, making t-shirts, cutting great promos, and really Drew McIntyre had the most selfless role this entire year. He got to win the title at WrestleMania but lost it right after. He got to main event Clash at the Castle Scotland only to come up short 2 times in a row. Won the Money in the Bank briefcase and then lost it right after, and then essentially lost the entire feud with CM Punk. But honestly, when you look at the CM Punk and Drew McIntyre feud, they both contributed obviously, but Drew McIntyre was the one that got the feud to that point. He was the one fueling it. And while he didn't end this year with all of the accolades and huge victory moments, I really think when we look back at 2024 years from now, we're all gonna say this was the year of Cody Rhodes, but Drew McIntyre was the MVP. But that's it. That is my list for the top 10 men's WWE superstars of 2024. Next up will be the top 10 women's WWE superstars of the year, followed by a few other end of the year wrap-up videos that I'm pretty excited for. But what do you think about my list? Who did I leave off? And who are your top 10 men's WWE superstars of the year? Comment below and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.